Out of all of the clamshell handhelds I've ever used or reviewed, this one is definitely my favorite. This is the AYN Thor, AYN's newest handheld that also happens to be a dual screen handheld. And call me biased, but I think this is the best dual screen handheld any of these companies have released. This device is incredible, and I think it has the potential to be my new go-to portable emulator, whether that be for 3DS, DS, or Wii U games with its 2 screens, or just single screen systems with its beautiful high refresh rate top screen. Not only is this probably my favorite AYN product ever, it might be my favorite portable emulator ever. Alright, you guys know the drill by now. Into the AM is back with their Black November sale. You guys know Into the AM, they're the clothing company that specializes in making really cool graphic tees. I've shown off plenty of their shirts before, not just because they have cool designs, but because they're also incredibly comfortable. I've shown off this one before, it glows in the dark. And it's probably my favorite at this point. They have a lot of designs to choose from when it comes to their graphic tees, but that's not all they sell. They have normal clothes, but that's kind of boring. Their Black November sale is happening now and goes until the 30th of this month, so go buy those shirts at a discount while you still can. And if you use my code George10 at checkout, you'll get an additional 10% off your order. Thank you Into the AM for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to talking about the AYN Thor. Before we get into any of my personal thoughts on the Thor, let's lay down some specs. On AYN's website, there are 4 different models you can choose from: the Lite, Base, Pro, and Max models. The Base, Pro, and Max models all have the exact same internals, all using the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor. The only difference between the 3 is their price, the amount of RAM they have, and the amount of storage they have. The Base has 8GB of RAM, 128GB of storage, and costs $300. The Pro has 12GB of RAM, 256GB of storage, and costs $350. And the Max has 16GB of RAM, a terabyte of storage, and costs $430. These roughly match the original Odin 2's different models in terms of specs, the main differences being the prices and the amount of storage in the Max model, which is now a terabyte instead of 512GB. It's a welcome change. That's just so much storage for something that most people are probably only going to be using for 3DS games, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to the specs. The Lite version is the model that really stands out here because it is the only model that uses a different processor from the rest, the Snapdragon 865, which can be found in other devices like the Retroid Pocket 5 and Mini. Certainly a capable processor, it's just not as powerful as the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. The Lite also has 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, same as the Base, and costs $250, so $50 less than the base model, which makes me wonder if it's really worth getting or if you should just spend the extra $50 on the base model. That's not a question I can answer though, because I don't have either model. The model I have here is the Max in the rainbow color, which is one of 4 different color options you can choose from, and I'm glad I chose the rainbow. The black would probably look sleek, and the transparent purple could be nostalgic for some, but I like having some small smidges of color on my otherwise clean devices. Also, the white just looks boring. But do keep in mind that I have the Max model as you watch the rest of this review because it is the most powerful model. I can't really see it mattering much for like 3DS and DS emulation, but it's when we get to higher end stuff like Wii U or even Switch where the power difference between the different models will definitely show. But once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's move on and talk about the hardware of this thing and how it really feels to use. Call me biased, call me a shill, I don't care. AYN has never made a bad feeling device, and that trend continues with the Thor. I'll talk about this more when we get to the controls, but I was worried that having a bottom screen would make the controls feel more cramped, but that just simply isn't the case. This device is definitely made of plastic, but that's not a problem whatsoever. There's parts of it that feel kind of rough to touch, which might be annoying to some, but I kind of like it because it makes it easier to hold. I wouldn't be surprised if they took several design cues from the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, another clamshell handheld that was released earlier this year. But looking at them side by side, they're different enough to be clearly different designs. The backside is really nothing special. There's a vent for the fan that has the AYN logo on it, but aside from that, it's completely plain, which I actually appreciate. Don't get me wrong, I love a good design. The Pocket Flip 2 has this clock design on the back, which I actually do like, but seeing how people have customized their Thors with stickers or different shells, just like so many would do with their 3DSs, I think I prefer having a plain backside. The hinge is probably the most important part of this device hardware-wise because it's what lets you fold it down like a 3DS. And this one's really good. It's not harsh, it can lock to 3 different angles, but it's sturdy enough that if you put it at an angle that's not one it snaps to, it'll stay in that position, which is really nice. The angles it snaps to are very similar to the angles a 3DS hinge snaps to, which is really cool. It It really helps drill in the idea that this is a modern day 3DS. Okay, moving on slightly because this is technically still part of the hardware, but because of how long I talk about it, I wanted to give it its own section. The screens are beautiful. Their dimensions are kind of weird because comparing them to the 3DS XL, the top screen on the Thor is bigger than on the 3DS by about 2 inches, but the bottom screen on the Thor is smaller by less than half an inch. Putting them side by side, you can tell the bottom screen is smaller, especially in how wide it is, which is really interesting seeing as the Thor is a bigger device overall. But it doesn't detract from the gameplay at all. It just looks kind of weird if you're used to the 3DS's screen sizes, which I am. Okay, so the screen sizes are different than the 3DS screens. Big whoop. What really matters is the screen quality, which the Thor has in spades. The 3DS's screens were roughly 400p for the top and 320p for the bottom, which sounds pretty bad, but it honestly didn't look that bad for what those numbers would suggest. But the Thor blows those out of the water. The top screen is 16:9, 1080p, and 120 Hz. Did you hear me right? 120 Hz. The bottom screen is a much weirder 27:31 aspect ratio, but it's also 1080p. Just 60 Hz though, which is perfectly fine. I don't know why you'd need this nearly 4-inch display to be 120 Hz anyway. Both screens are AMOLED, and how good they look can't be understated. While playing really any kind of game, I'm looking at the models and textures and just admiring how good some of these older games can look when upscaled, and how some more modern games can look when played on these nice screens. Something else about these screens I love is how they kind of melt into the device. No obnoxious bezel taking up space, the screens are just there and they look great. This has been a trend on a lot of devices for a while now. I know the Retroid Pocket 5 and Mini did this, I'm sure many others did, and many others will. But it matters the most for this device because of that bottom screen. If there was a big bezel surrounding it that would take up space that could be used for the controls, it would just ruin how nice the device looks, but there is no bezel, and the screens both look gorgeous where they're placed. If there is one thing I can complain about, it's that I'm not sure if I'm having burn-in issues or not. Why I'm wondering if this device is having burn-in issues already is because when I pull down the notification center, oftentimes the remnants of the home screen can be seen in the gray area.
Alright, I'm going to stop myself right there because I actually asked about this in AYN's Discord server, asking if anybody else has been worried about burn-in on their Thors, because I have been, like I said, having an issue where the home screen will still show when I pull down the notification bar. And someone clarified to me that this is due to image retention on these OLED displays that AYN should be able to fix through an OTA update. So it's not an actual issue of burn-in, it's an issue of image retention on these OLED displays. So disregard that.
Another smaller issue I've run into is that the screens will turn on when the device is shut. The device knows when it's closed and it turns off the screens when you close it. That's not the issue. The issue is that the power button is on the outside, which means that it'll be hit by everything surrounding it and the screens will turn on and drain the battery without you knowing. This probably could have been solved by putting the power button on the face of the device instead of the bottom like many 3DS models did, or just making it so the screens can't turn on when the device is closed through the software or something. There have been times where I've pulled this thing out of my pocket and found that the battery is drained 50% and the screens are on and the device is warm because it hit something in my pocket and the device turned on while it was shut, which is just very frustrating. It's honestly why I almost always just turn it off fully before closing it up and putting it in my bag or pockets, because I don't want the battery to be dead by the time I actually want to use it. It's not that big of a deal. I just wish that I could leave this thing in sleep mode forever like I usually do for my 3DS, but it's really not that big of a deal. It's just a little complaint I have. But yeah, those are my only real complaints. Let's move on. This technically still involves the screens, but because it also involves the software, I'm going to be clumping the two together for this section specifically. A big worry I'm sure many people had when it came to this device is how well the two screens are going to play together in terms of Android. This is a worry I also had because it's largely uncharted territory. Now, thankfully, I thought of this worry beforehand and did a lot to address it without directly interfering with any emulators or apps. The most notable is their own control center, which you can access by pressing this little AYN button on the bottom of the device. This gives you 3 different options. You can access the power settings, which lets you change your performance mode, the top screen's FPS lock, and the LEDs under the joysticks I completely forgot about, because who actually uses those LEDs? You can also switch between apps easily by pressing the task option, but the mode section is the one I'm the most interested in. It lets you change the volume and brightness of the device, which is cool, but what's more interesting is what's on top. The different screen modes. You can turn the bottom screen off if you're only playing on the top screen, you can turn the top screen off if you're only playing on the bottom screen, or you can have both screens on if you're playing a dual screen game or multitasking. I don't judge. I saw someone on Twitter the other day watching the World Series on the bottom screen while playing a 3DS game on the top screen, and I respect it. I talked about this back when I pre-ordered the Thor, but I can't see myself using this for multitasking, at least that often. I said in the video that it was because I use AirPods and AirPods are annoying on Android, but I found out after actually connecting my AirPods to the Thor that it's really not that bad of an experience. There was a noticeable amount of delay between my AirPods and the Thor, which was really weird because I didn't experience any of that when I connected my AirPods to the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, but it still worked perfectly fine. It's an amazing use case, but it's something I just can't see myself getting any use out of because I like to use these devices specifically for gaming. I'll connect my headphones if I want to hear game audio, but if I'm going to watch a YouTube video or listen to music, I'll just do that separately on a different device like my phone or laptop. Is that a privileged thing to say? Probably, but that's just how I work. Sue me. Being able to multitask has been really useful though. If you're playing a single screen game on the top or bottom screen, you can use the other screen to look up a guide. I actually did this while setting up Cemu to work on both screens. I had Cemu open on the bottom screen and Chrome open on the top, trying to figure out how to get it all working. It's small use cases like these where I could see this being useful for me outside of dual screen gaming, and it makes this device just that much cooler. Alright, I think it's high time we talk about the controls on this thing. I talked about earlier how before I got this device, I was worried that having a bottom screen would make the controls feel cramped, but thankfully, I was wrong. Let's talk about the control sticks because I was actually wrong about those specifically. In my unboxing video from last week, I mentioned that I was worried that my thumbs would hit the circular ridge around the joystick a lot as I played with the Thor more, but that just hasn't been the case. It's honestly something I forgot about until I sat down to write this video script because it just isn't an issue. My thumbs learned how to rest on the joysticks without hitting the circular ridges as often, and it never became an issue again. It wasn't really even an issue to begin with. I was just worried that if it happened a lot more often, it would become really annoying, but seeing as I completely forgot about it up until right now, shows that it didn't really matter. The joysticks themselves, though, are actually really nice. For a dual screen handheld, they could have just cheaped out and went with Switch style joysticks, but these actually feel really nice. They're recessed far under the rest of the controls to give them enough space to travel and breathe without smacking into the top screen every time it closes. This probably contributed to the device being as bulky as it is, but that's not an issue for me. I honestly like it more because it makes the device feel better to hold. But yeah, the joysticks feel great, have a good amount of travel to them, and even when they hit the edges of the device, it doesn't feel sharp or like it smacks against it. It just rubs smoothly against the circular outline, which is good. For the aesthetics, I guess it would have been cool if they went with circle pads like the 3DS had, but Retroid did that for their original Pocket Flip, and we see how well that turned out. So let's just be happy they went with good joysticks. The D-pad and face buttons aren't incredibly interesting to talk about just because they feel good and there's not much more to it. The D-pad is clicky and big, resembles the D-pad on the Odin 2, which I like, but I wish they copied the D-pad from the Odin 2 Mini just because that one was incredibly clicky like the D-pad on the 3DS. It still feels good, it's just a little more mushy than I would like, but it still feels good, so that's not really an issue. Same goes for the buttons, although AYN hasn't really been known to have clicky buttons. These might actually be their clickiest. You can tell it's pressing into a rubber membrane, but they feel good, so it's not an issue. If it were up to me, every button on this device would feel like you were clicking into a computer mouse, but I understand that not everyone likes that, so these are fine as they are. The bumpers and triggers feel really good. The triggers are analog, which is nice for retro games and for more modern racing games. I said in my unboxing video that these triggers are smaller than the ones on the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, but I'm honestly not sure if that's even true. Putting them side by side, they actually look the exact same size. The only reason I can think of as to why I thought that is because the space between the hinge and the bumpers on the Pocket Flip 2 is slightly bigger than the space on the Thor, which might have made me think the triggers on the Pocket 2 were bigger. It's kind of dumb, but hey, so am I, so this isn't really that surprising. But yeah, the triggers and bumpers both feel really good. The bumpers are nice and clicky, and the triggers have a good amount of travel to them. They feel good. Not much more to say. Alright. At this point, I feel like we've covered all the necessary bases, so let's move on to some good old emulation. Starting with 3DS because it's probably what you're going to be playing the most of on here, it works fantastic. The emulator most people recommend you use is Azahar because it's not only the most updated 3DS emulator, but it also has direct support for dual screen devices. It's easy to set up. Just go into settings, layout, and set the landscape screen layout to single screen and secondary display screen layout to bottom screen. After that, when you launch a game, it should display on both screens, top on top and bottom on bottom. 3DS games run perfectly in my experience. Obviously, I have the max model, so I'd be a little worried if they didn't, but I expect that even on the light model, games will run well, seeing as it's literally being advertised as a modern day 3DS. There's slight letterboxing on both screens, which is to be expected, but they both look really good when playing games. As I said I would in my unboxing video, I've been playing a lot of 3DS games, and I've been jumping between a bunch of them, namely Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, Animal Crossing New Leaf, Kirby Planet Robobot, and Tomodachi Life, and they have all run perfectly in my experience. Okay, that might have been a little bit of a lie. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is a game that struggles on a lot of emulators, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to play through it on here because of that, but using Azahar and the newest turnip drivers, it runs really well. There are noticeably long stutters whenever it loads a new area, but it's still completely playable. I've also been playing a lot of Animal Crossing New Leaf. It's my favorite game in the series, so I wanted to revisit it on this device specifically, and it's been a blast. It's still better than New Horizons, and I imagine I'll still be arguing that even after the 3.0 update comes out in January. But anyways, something that I talked about in my review of the Retroid Pocket dual screen peripheral a while back is that while playing in Azahar, I noticed a little bit of input lag, and I remember specifically blaming that on Azahar. But I haven't experienced any of that on the Thor, which makes me wonder if it really was Azahar, or if it was the dual screen peripheral that was making the input lag happen. Who knows? Having both screens visible at the same time is what I'm sure most people are attracted to this device for, and it is a really big perk. Both screens can be upscaled, and it's just nice being able to see both screens like how it was originally. It's not like it was ever really a problem playing 3DS and DS games with only one screen, but it's just so much nicer getting to see what's going on both screens without having some weird layout or just not seeing one screen at all. Alright, so Azahar is great, but it's not the only 3DS emulator that supports dual screens. There's also a version of Citra MMJ that you can find that supports it as well. The only reason I can see you using the Citra fork over Azahar is if you don't have decrypted ROMs, because your ROMs need to be decrypted to be able to play them in Azahar. But it's not that hard to find decrypted ROMs if you really look for them. Okay, so 3DS runs great, but what about DS? Well, as I'm sure you can assume, DS also runs really well. I have to admit that I haven't been playing many DS games, mainly because I've been focusing most of my time on 3DS games, and Danganronpa, but that doesn't make them any less exciting. The emulator AYN and many others recommend you use is called Melon DS. I'm familiar with Melon DS because I used to use it in high school during class. I mean, when I had free time. So yeah, I'm really familiar with it. But the nightly build is the one we're looking for as it has support for dual screens. To get it to work, you need to press the three dots in the top right corner, click Settings, click Video, click External Display Screen, and select Bottom Screen. From there, you need to set different screen layouts for both the top and bottom screens. Both have layout settings you can manually set. For the top, you delete the bottom screen and fit the screen to the size of the top screen and vice versa for the bottom screen. After that's all done, launching any game should result in both screens being shown. You're going to have to map the controls and do all the settings you want, but that's pretty much the basics of getting both screens set up. Now, obviously the screens aren't the same size on the top and bottom like they were on the original DS. I've seen people change the resolution and size of the top screen to match that of the bottom screen, but I honestly do not care that much, so it's not an issue for me. I'm not a pixel perfect kind of guy. If it looks good enough compared to the original, I'll be happy. I have downloaded a few more DS games that I've heard about and want to try out, but honestly, I think I might wait until that Ambernick DS clone releases and play them on there. Who knows though, maybe I'll get sick of these 3DS games and want something new, and then I'll go and play these DS games. There are a lot of DS games I've wanted to play but never really got around to, so this might be a great excuse to finally get through some of them. But nonetheless, this is an amazing handheld for DS games. Not only can you see both screens, but the games look incredible when upscaled to higher resolutions. Alright, I'm taking a bit of a risk here. In my previous reviews, I've refused to show any footage of Nintendo Switch or Wii U games running in fear of Nintendo taking down my video and sending a copyright strike my way. But because this device is so unique, I'm willing to show you Wii U games and how they run on here. I'm not going to be showing Switch games, but because this is a dual screen device, I feel like I have to show you Wii U. CMU on Android is a relatively new thing. I'm pretty sure the first release happened about a year ago, and the main releases don't support dual screens, but a fork someone made does. I'm honestly not sure how I got both screens to work. I'm pretty sure I just launched a game from the top screen, opened the sidebar and clicked both Show Pad and External Pad screen, closed the game, launched CMU from the bottom screen and launched a game, then closed that and opened CMU again from the top screen, launched the same game, and then it started working on both. That's probably wrong. I'm sure there are many other guides you can follow that will show you how to do it, but that's all I can remember from how I got it set up. Wii U games are a bit more awkward than 3DS and DS games just because of the gamepad's aspect ratio. The black bars on the bottom screen are much more prevalent. You can set it to stretch the video, but that looks bad, so I wouldn't recommend it. It's honestly not that big of a deal. I just thought I'd point it out. This being a fork that is currently in active development and is on version 0.0.3 means that not all games are going to run well or even run at all. For example, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse has an issue where the colorful lines you draw just won't show up on the screen. And I know there's supposed to be a workaround in the graphics pack you can download, but that does not fix it for me. Paper Mario Color Splash also has an issue where the characters have these scan lines running over them at all times, and it's really distracting. Those are the only ones I've noticed because I haven't been playing too many Wii U games. I've been focusing most of my time on 3DS emulation, but I wouldn't really expect any amazing Wii U emulation anytime soon unless like the main releases add dual screen support or something. It's really cool that we're able to play Wii U games on Android nowadays, especially with dual screens, but the practicality of it all is what I'm wondering about the most because most important Wii U games have been ported to Switch. So like, just play them on a Switch emulator. Speaking of, Switch emulation runs really well. Switch emulation ran well on my Retroid Pocket Flip too, so it shouldn't really be that much of a surprise, but it's just cool to say. I'm not showing footage because of my aforementioned fear of Nintendo, but what I like to do with a lot of these devices is put Super Smash Bros. Ultimate on here, start an 8-player match, all high-level CPUs, and just let it run for like 5 minutes and see how much it stutters, how many shaders it has to build, and once all of that's done, what frame rate it's pretty consistently at. Most of the time, these devices just run it straight at 60, which is really cool. And this one did that as well. Obviously, if Switch emulation runs well on here, Wii and GameCube are going to run well as well. And they do. I haven't played much of either because like I've said many times before, I've been focusing mainly on 3DS games, but I have tested them out and they run really well. Not sure you'll be buying this thing to be emulating those consoles, but I mean, it's a nice perk. Moving on, I need a way to take advantage of the insane amount of storage this device has. So let's talk about Steam games. GameHub is the obvious choice, so we're going to be talking about that first, but don't worry. I haven't forgotten about Game Native. GameHub works about as well as you'd expect it to. AAA games still aren't really playable. Whether that's GameHub's fault or the device's fault is up to you to decide. But the fact is, this thing is probably going to be a big indie device, like every other device has been so far. I briefly mentioned earlier that I played the second Danganronpa game on here, and that's true. What's also true is that I didn't get it from Steam, which means that I had to put the exe file on here and play it through a translator. That was a really great and often overlooked feature of GameHub, and the game isn't graphically intense, so it ran really well. I've also tried out Resident Evil Village, which, just like the Odin 2 Max I have, its frame rate was pretty consistently in the teens. Safe to say that for now, this thing is going to be an indie or low-powered machine, at least in terms of GameHub. The 120Hz screen does lend itself well for games like Neon White and other games that support higher frame rates, but expect this to mostly play indie games well. And even Neon White wasn't hitting those high frame rates, it just looked nicer on the higher refresh rate screen. I actually did install Resident Evil Village through Game Native to try it out again there, and after it took forever to download because of my slow college's Wi-Fi, I pressed play, and it refused to load. I tried changing settings or things in the back end, but nothing I tried could get it to run, which I think suggests that GameHub is going to be your best bet for most things. It obviously doesn't hurt to try Game Native, especially if a game you want to play doesn't run well on GameHub, but I'm going to be sticking to GameHub. It's a little weird to be closing out this review already, because this is a device I have been so incredibly excited for, not just to review, but to play like 3DS and just video games on. I've always been a huge fan of the 3DS, not just for its game library or the nostalgia I have associated with it, but just the novelty of having two screens on one device. I spent so much time as a kid playing my 3DS. Games like Pushmo, Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion, Tomodachi Life, Mario 3D Land, Mario Kart 7, and Mario and Luigi Dream Team, just to name a few. So to have a device in the year of our Lord 2025 with two screens that takes me back to that feeling I had as a kid playing 3DS games is just so exciting. It runs Android, it plays all the 3DS games I love and so much more. It's just so incredible. It takes me back and makes me really happy that I get to revisit a lot of games that I played as a kid on hardware that mimics the actual 3DS but is just better. But the cynical part of me does wonder where we go from here. I'm sure we're going to get a bunch of iterations from a bunch of different companies in regards to dual screen handhelds. I'm sure in a few years down the line, we're going to get a Thor 2. But part of me felt like dual screen handhelds were kind of the end game. Like a few years down the line, we're going to get a dual screen handheld from all of these companies, and we won't really need anything else. But we're here now. It makes me wonder what the next big innovation in this space is going to be. Folding screens, detachable controllers. No, wait, GPT already did that. But whatever it is, I'll be there and be excited. But I don't think anything is going to live up to the excitement that I've gotten from this dual screen handheld. So we're just going to have to wait and see, I guess. So my final thoughts on the Thor. I can see this becoming my new go-to handheld for like any video game. Not just 3DS, DS, and Wii U games, but also single screen systems like Switch, GameCube, and Wii. I love the clamshell form factor. I love having dual screens for dual screen gaming and playing single screen games with multitasking. And I love basically everything else about this device. It's a no-brainer to recommend, especially if you want to play 3DS games. But even if you want to play like single screen games, or if you love it for like the multitasking aspect, it's a no-brainer to recommend for that too, because it's just so cool. If you bought the Retroid Pocket 2, or if you saw the Retroid Pocket 2 and didn't buy it because you wanted to wait for a dual screen handheld, here you go. This is perfect. I really, really love this device, and I really can't see that changing anytime soon. I know we're supposed to get that Ambernic DS handheld in December and the AYN Odin 3 sometime this month, but I really can't see either of those surpassing my love for this thing. But what do you guys think? Do you have a Thor and do you love it? Are you on the fence about buying one? Do you think this whole dual screen thing is a fad that'll die out eventually? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.